In the heart of East London, only a stone's throw from the financial district of Canary Wharf, and at the very centre of the 2012 Olympic Village, lies a complex network of waterways with a rich and fascinating history that date back to the 9th century. These are the Bow-Back Rivers.
Hey guys, I hope you're good. Today I'm going to be finding out a little bit more about the river that I call home. I'm here on my moorings on Three Mills Wall River, which is one of 11 waterways which twist and curve themselves around local landmarks to collectively be known as the Bow-Back Rivers. This entire area was originally marshland, and in the 12th century an abbey was erected and the monks were granted 11 acres of land, including that which my moorings sits on. And included in that 11 acres was also a number of tidal mills. And to ensure that they were as productive as possible, the monks began draining water in the area, and that was the start of what we now know as the Bow-Back Rivers. However, they weren't the first people to redirect water from the River Lee. In the year 896, Alfred the Great split the river into two in order to strand a troop of Danes. Now, a lot has changed about this area since Alfred's day, and there have been just as many changes to the Bow-Back Rivers. So the 11 rivers that make up the Bow-Back River are
the River Lee, Pudding Mill River, City Mill River, Waterworks River, Channel Sea River, St Thomas's Creek, Three Mills Back River, Three Mills Wall River, Prescott Channel, Bow Creek, and Abbey Creek. The River Lee, which starts in Luton and runs through East London, flows into the Thames via Bow Creek. The river was originally tidal up until Hackney Wick, and before the construction of the Limehouse Cut in the 18th century, the only way for boats to get between the River Lee and the Thames was via Bow Creek. Bow Creek is a 2-mile estuary which connects the River Thames to the River Lee. The creek joins the River Lee at Bow Locks, and there's been some form of lock in that location as far back as at least the year 1307. I've lived here for almost 2 years and have never explored Bow Creek before. As soon as I stepped onto the towpath, the feel of it was completely different to the neighbouring Limehouse Cut. The wide tree-lined towpath was so quiet, and the absence of tall buildings lining the water, which is a key feature of the Limehouse Cut, made Bow Creek feel warmer on a bright summer's morning. I hardly encountered another soul as I explored its banks. It's hard to imagine this as a once thriving industrial route, with hundreds of barges travelling along the waters every day to collect and deliver their goods. But the adjacent business parks remind you that this was still an attractive base for businesses because of the close proximity to the city. People often comment on my videos saying that they don't like the waterways in London because they're too built up and they're ugly. They say that canals should just be bordered by open countryside. But you know, what we need to remember is that the only reason that our big cities even exist is because of the rivers. And had it not been for the Industrial Revolution, then we wouldn't even have our beloved canals at all. And that's why, for me, I've got such an appreciation of the waterways in London. And I can see that beauty within that contrast of the old versus the new, man-made versus nature, and the way that they can just so happily coexist alongside each other. Although right now I would happily trade off living on a flight path to get this video done in one take. At the end of the towpath at Bow Creek lies a hidden gem. I was reluctant to share it with you. This is Cody Dock, a derelict dock which has been transformed into a community space with cafe, bar and gardens. It plays host to arts events and local community projects. It's a sanctuary from the hustle and bustle of modern life, and proves exactly how our canals and rivers are being successfully revived since their original purpose has largely ceased to exist.
There have been mills along the River Lee from the time of the Domesday Book. The mills at Three Mills were used to grind grain, which used to be used to make bread, but then eventually was used as the biggest supplier of the local gin palaces. And the mills were owned by the Stratford Langthorne Abbey until it was dissolved by Henry VIII in the 1530s. It was around about this time that one of the mills was destroyed and the three became two. However, the name has still survived. Within the house mill is still the largest tidal mill in the world, and the clock mill building has now become a school. There are two Three Mills rivers. The Three Mills back river, unfortunately, most of that has now been filled in, but the Three Mills Wall River still survives, and that is where I live today on my narrowboat. There's been a narrowboat community at Three Mills since 1998, although the location of the moorings has shifted slightly.
You can see here the original pontoons from the mooring.
The river used to be fully tidal, with the boats sitting on the mud at low tide. And before City Mill Lock was reopened, the only way that boats could get in and out of the moorings was to go through Prescott Channel, along Bow Creek, and then through the bow locks to join the Limehouse Cut. And because of the tide, it was a real race against the clock to make sure you got out on time, and often people would miss their window of opportunity and have to wait hours for the tide to change again. As part of the preparation for the 2012 Olympic Games, the moors were temporarily relocated to allow for construction of a weir, as well as the new Three Mills Lock, which would mean that water levels on the mooring could be controlled. During this time, City Mill Lock was also refurbished, making it much easier for boats to get in and out of the moorings. We'll discover later on what other changes that famous sporting event brought on for the Bowback Rivers. From the time that the mills first existed, barges would travel up the Thames, along Bow Creek, and then through the bow locks. The locks as they exist today were constructed in 1850 and then rebuilt in the 1930s, along with the construction of Prescott Channel. Although one could not exist without the other, there were a lot of disagreements between the bargees and the local mill owners. Older locks required a lot of water to be operated, which obviously diverted it away from the tidal mills. And the bargees also claimed that lock keepers were siding with the millers by refusing them passage through the locks at certain times of the tide. A further demand on the water came in the 18th century, when the rivers were used to supply drinking water for the local population.
Waterworks River, as the name suggests, was once home to the local waterworks. The river is artificial and was cut by the water company in 1743. The river now flows between the Olympic Stadium and the London Aquatic Centre. With the opening of Waterworks River, the situation between the bargees and the millers had reached breaking point.
Engineer John Smeaton was employed to find a solution. He suggested replacing the locks with a more modern design which would consume a lot less water. And, most importantly, he also proposed the construction of the Limehouse Cut, which would start at Bow Locks and join the Thames at Limehouse. Traditionally, passage through the bow locks had been toll-free. However, when they were rebuilt in 1850, the lock keepers tried to charge boats for coming through. This caused further tension, but then two parties reached a compromise that lock keepers would charge for coming through the lock gates, but passage through the adjacent floodgates would remain free. This was formalised by an Act of Parliament and seen as a victory by the bargees. But, as you know, nothing in this world is free. And because the Bowback Rivers were not generating any income, there was no incentive to maintain them, and they ended up falling into a state of disrepair. By the 1920s, there was mass unemployment, and an application was made to regenerate the Bowback Rivers in the hope of creating jobs, as well as tackling the ongoing issue of flooding from the rivers. This became the River Lee Flood Relief Act, and saw a major reconstruction of the rivers, as well as the creation of the Prescott Channel, which would connect the Three Mills rivers to Bow Creek.
Prescott Channel also flows into Abbey Creek, which is very overgrown at this time of year, but is a haven for wildlife and a lovely place to walk. The public footpath has only recently reopened, but has quickly become popular, which is a relief because the first time I ventured down here it felt a bit like Murder Alley. The most distinguishing feature of Abbey Creek is the Abbey Mills pump house, which opened in 1868. Here you can see where Abbey Creek joins Channelsea River at Channelsea Island. Between 1957 and 1958, much of the Channelsea River was culverted, as you can see here. Across the road is Stratford Market Depot on London Underground's Jubilee line. Your bonus fact for today, the Jubilee line was originally going to be called the Fleet line, after London's largest underground river.
By the 1960s, use of the rivers had declined rapidly, and they were reclassified as a remainder waterway, which meant that British Waterways would no longer be putting any investment into them. City Mill Lock and Carpenter's Road Lock were closed, and the future looked bleak. If you talk to people who lived in the area at the time, they would describe the rivers as unwelcoming, smelly, full of rubbish. But then in 2002, they were thrown a lifeline when British Waterways announced that they were making it a priority to restore the Bowback Rivers. Then, in 2005, London was announced as the host city for the 2012 Olympic Games, with Stratford chosen as the main location. The Bowback Rivers were to be given a complete makeover.
City Mill Lock, which connects Waterworks River to St Thomas's Creek at the junction with City Mill River, was restored and reopened. City Mill River originally powered City Mill, which was used in the production of chemicals. The mill was demolished in the 1930s. Further along Waterworks River is Carpenter's Road Lock, which was also due to be reopened in time for the Olympic Games. However, the lock did not open again until 2017. Carpenter's Road Lock is the only one of its type, with radial gates at each end. Make sure to check out my video where I went through the lock. I'll post a card up in the corner for you.
One of the bold claims of the Olympic bid was that many of the construction materials for the Olympic Stadium would be transported via the rivers. But being tidal, it meant that the water level was either so low that boats couldn't navigate, or so high that they couldn't get under the low bridges. So a new lock was built on the Prescott Channel, 3 Mills Lock with the number 2012. Of course, construction of the lock overran, and hardly any of the materials for the Olympic Village were actually delivered by river. The Olympics weren't all good news for the Bowback Rivers. The chosen location for the main Olympic Stadium also happened to be the location of Pudding Mill River, so almost all of that was filled in to make way for the stadium.
Channelsea River was further culverted. To balance out the environmental impact, the largest aquatic planting project in British history was undertaken around the Olympic Village. It also continues to be an extremely popular visitor spot, with lots of people enjoying the activities available both on and beside the water.
Another thing you can't fail to notice is the rapid redevelopment of this area. It is unrecognisable from its pre-Olympic days, with new homes and buildings being constructed at an alarming pace. What will this mean for the future of the Bowback Rivers? These waterways have a fascinating history. They tell a story of perseverance, of not only survival, but of thriving against all the odds. I'm not sure what lies in store next for the rivers, but if the past is anything to go by, I'm sure they have an interesting future to look forward to, and many more stories to tell. thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that, then please give it a thumbs up. Do let me know in the comments if you want to see more of this type of video. I'm going to be in Edinburgh next week and hopefully checking out the canal up there. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. See you all soon. Bye. Oh, there's another aeroplane. Come on, come on, zoom it, zoom it.